So yeah, I know there's been some space between these videos and I still have this backlog. It's not an excuse or anything. We all have like, oh, weird, Phil has a full-time job. I do, right? Just been very, very busy, lots of deadlines on top of deadlines and stuff. But I'm continuing to read, if a little bit more slowly than I'd like to. So I actually finished reading The Mindwarpers by Eric Frank Russell on November 3rd. Today's the 26th, and I'm recording this. The 26th. 26th of November, the day before Thanksgiving, if that matters. So what have I been doing for the last, 23 days? I'm just not doing videos. I've just been doing the work, right? But we're going to get caught up. I've committed to the 100 book challenge, and I'm committing to the videos. Here we go. The Mindwarpers by Eric Frank Russell. Okay, so Eric Frank Russell, who is this guy? British author from Berkshire, born, I guess, in Berkshire, England, but was living in Liverpool, really, when he first discovered science fiction and met up with some science fiction fans, was reading the magazines that were being published then, I think, in England, but definitely that were being brought over from the US. And it seems as though, and I'm only sort of going by some basic sources here, that it was a pretty short transition from, ooh, this science fiction stuff is cool, to he's actually started writing it. And this was back in the day now where there's just all these tons of science fiction magazines being published. And so you could be this kind of professional science fiction short story author, right? And so he started to sell stories and novellas to magazines like Astounding, which was really sort of the big magazine of the time. Then eventually wrote a full-length novella called The Sinister Barrier that was published in a magazine called Unknown in May of 1968. I will hope to have a cover image here to show how cool that was. And then actually just, and kept writing. And went on to win the 1955 Hugo Award for Best Short Story. That's for Alamagusa and Astounding of May 1955. And, these are stories, in some cases, most of these stories were really showcasing this kind of signature sense of humor that he developed. And I've talked before about how I have a reticence against, is that the right word? I think it is, against, maybe even a bias against funny genre fiction, like, ooh, science fiction is really dumb and funny and fantasy is really stupid and hilarious. Because that shift from there's a sense of humor to this, but it's still a great science fiction or fantasy story in the same way that, Young Frankenstein was hilarious. I still think the funniest movie of all time, but it was also a great monster movie, and you could see the love in there, as opposed to Spaceballs, which was basically just like, if you like science fiction, you're an idiot, and there was nothing there but, whatever. What are we doing? Eric Frank Russell, though, knew how to hold that balance. And this book in particular, The Mindwarpers, is a great example of that. So this is not my first journey into the mind of Eric Frank Russell. He is fairly well represented in my coveted, wonderful, you can't see it, it's over there, Ace Doubles collection. I have 4 of them, actually. So this is Sentinels of Space, right there, with great cover art there, but also some glare. Sentinels of Space, this was the 8th Ace Double ever printed. So this goes back to March of 1954. And on the other side is an anthology of short stories edited by Donald A. Wilhelm himself, called The Ultimate Invader. And in this one, Eric Frank Russell also has a story, yeah, to lead off the anthology that is actually called The Ultimate Invader. So how about that, right? So we're featuring Eric Frank Russell. He's getting all the top billing, really, along with Murray Leinster, Frank B. Long, right? Malcolm Jameson. Don't you love these? If you don't love ace doubles, I just don't understand. I don't understand you as a human. Then I have this one also, where we have Three to Conquer by Eric Frank Russell. There you go again. Yeah. And then what's on the back? Doomsday Eve by Robert Moore Williams. But really we're to talk about Three to Conquer. Another great one. Look at this. And these I have not yet read. This is bad. This one I have read, which I need to take out of the bag because I realized when I was getting things ready to make this video, it was falling apart. A huge chunk of pages had to be glued. So do you want to see? I could cut around this. I put binder clips on it to squeeze it together while the glue dried, and then I went down and I had lunch. Ooh, that was loud, huh? Sorry about that, everybody. Professional television at work here. I think it's holding up. Yeah, I got to be careful. It's not dry yet. Oh, look, the pages are coming right back out. No, I did not a good job. I should have let this dry a lot longer. I will fix this again. Oh my gosh in heaven. This one I actually read. First with the collection, right, as opposed to anthology, because all of the stories are written by Eric Frank Russell. Six Worlds Yonder. I remember loving every one of these stories. He's just good at it. These are not, I don't remember them being, it was years ago that I read it. I don't remember them being, like super serious, like political stories or anything like that. Just good, fun, great sci-fi stories. Good, they're good and great. They're both good, great, and fun. They're all three of those things. Let's take a deep breath. And on the other side of that is the Space Willies by Eric Frank Russell. This one I just adored. And again, I just said I don't love funny sci-fi movies. I don't like spoofs of science fiction, fantasy. But here I have used this as an example of how to do humor in a science fiction story without it becoming, hey, everybody, yeah, science fiction is dumb, right? So in the Space Willies from 1958, this one, covered by Ed Emshwiller, who's just all over the ace doubles. This was originally a short story or a novella, I guess, called Plus X. He then expanded it even further in 1959 and called it Next of Kin. Apparently no novel is ever finished, yeah. And I just love this one. This was a funny story about this kind of guy who's out there all by himself. There's humanity is at war with this sort of really completely unknown alien species. And this guy is sent out as a scout to sort of spy in this, the sort of space version of the U-2 spy plane. And he starts to go a little bit loopy out there all by himself. And then eventually crashes, spoiler alert, and is taken prisoner by the aliens and finds a way to kind of understand them while at the same time trying to manipulate them to get himself out of there. But there was surprisingly politically and socially robust. So again, this is an author where I'm thinking he's writing these goofy fun stories, but he's clearly also has something to say. So how about that? So we'll put that down gingerly so as to not cause any more damage while we go back to the Mindwarpers. So this was a book, The Mindwarpers, was originally published in the UK under the title With a Strange Device. It's kind of a cool title. And as apparently was just sort of standard practice at the time, was imported stateside and then retitled The Mindwarpers, published by Lancer Books originally in 1965. And then, again as The Mindwarpers in 1972. This is the 1972 Lancer reissue. This is the one that I found at random out in a used bookstore somewhere at some time. I don't even remember. It was years ago. And it's got this super cool, let's see how zoomy in we can get on this, John Berkeley super awesome spaceship cover, right? I mean, this was just 70s sci-fi art right here, which was fantastic, right? This was me just as a kid just going like, the greatest thing ever. Like if I had seen this in a bookstore, I'd been like, I need that because of that spaceship. At risk of this being kind of a spoiler, there's not a single mention of any spacecraft in the entire book. This super cool spaceship, not in there. Any other spaceship, super cool or not in there. And apparently this was another thing, just like changing the title between, somewhere over the Atlantic between England and America. It was, I don't know, man, put a rocket ship on it. Here's another one that was a favorite of mine. I found this book and was working to bring J.T. McIntosh back in print in the U.S., which I succeeded in doing. You can now order those through Prologue books. They've been out for a while now, right? And I was like, oh, this book is so cool. And he was kind of how I got to know that J.T. McIntosh was even out there. How do you go, as a sci-fi fan, you're, working your way through Half Price Books or wherever, and you see this Chris Foss cover and you're not like, I'm in, right? And then I was like, oh, I got to read that awesome J.T. McIntosh book. No spaceships in this at all. No giant futuristic city at all. No spaceships. This was clearly just a sort of marketing-driven thing at the time. Like, we don't care what the cover is. You said it was science fiction, so we slapped a science fiction on it. We put science fiction all up in this thing. And it is a science fiction novel. No rocket ships at all. So anyway, that was a thing. That was a thing that happened more than once. For me, the Mindwarpers really came from a tradition that was already being invented by Philip K. Dick, which I think we can think of as the Philip K. Dick tradition, where this was not about rocket ships. It was not about ray guns and aliens and monsters and robots. It was all going on in this one character's head. It's a story about, memory, and memory as identity, and what someone might be drawn to do. Yeah, in the name of guilt and the fear of being, sort of exposed as a criminal. So it really gets, so talking about this book, right, beyond the kind of initial setup, like the end of chapter 2 kind of thing, feels to me like it's going to be all spoilers. I don't want to do spoilers because I really want you to read this known classic here. This should be one of these books that people are talking about, honestly. And I think the spaceship on the cover, and one thing that we're definitely going to talk about, maybe has kept that from being true. So I don't really want to talk about the story beyond it begins with this guy who works, well, first of all, okay, let's start with this. Remember I promised that I wasn't just going to be doing book reviews, that we're going to talk about, this is Fantasy Author's Handbook, where we're going to talk about writing, right? So we're going to talk about these books as examples of what to do, what not to do, sort of how the genre is developed and so on. So here's the thing that I think probably held this book back. The first chapter is just nothing but info dump. Info dump, right? That seriously almost made me DNF this thing. I was like, oh, come on, man, I can't. Because it was really just a chapter from no point of view at all. There was no point of view character. It was just Frank Russell himself describing this government research installation, super top secret. kind of like an Area 51 sort of thing, or Bell Labs kind of deal. And goes into like all the security measures, and there's these different groups and by color, and if you're not in this color, you can't go to that, and whatever. I don't even remember, because it was just like reading a government report. No thanks. And so I thought, why? And I always have 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 books that I'm reading at any given time. So it became deprioritized and then deprioritized again. And I thought, there's no law that says I have to finish this. So then I thought, no, this is Eric Frank Russell, right? You remember, he was the guy who wrote the Space Willies. That was like awesome. Keep going, like give it another chapter. And so I read chapter 2 and I was like, oh, okay. now there's something interesting happening. There's a character happening, right? And really strictly in this character's point of view, we are this guy. And by the end of chapter 2, I was like, hey, hold on a second. And so it looks like if you follow me on Goodreads and you care, and I can't imagine why you would, you'd see that it took me like a really long time to read this book, but it didn't. It took me like a very short period of time to read chapter 1, and then a very long period of time for me to sort of talk myself into going back into this thing. So what does that mean for us as authors? I know you want everybody to know your world. And believe me, the authors that I work with so often do this. There is the prologue that is just the history of the world. And as awesomely creative and robust and well thought out as that may be, I always just say, it's gotta go. That's gotta go, right? And this is why. Because now you have a book that starts out with clunkety, 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 clunkety. This is the complex security measures at the government laboratory and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. No, right? No. So, info dumps are bad no matter where you put them, let's be honest. And no matter how you try to disguise that as the walk and talk, where the young apprentice is like, what else can you tell me about this city? Like, oh my God, like no, right? To open your book with that is maybe the worst sin of all. And it's not a sin against me. It's not a sin against mankind. It's a sin against your own career as an author. It's like people are just going to pick that up and go, oh God, not again. And it's over, right? So how many readers were left behind? How many readers bailed on the Mindwarpers over the, last, has it been 50 years? I don't know. There's no way of knowing. There's no way of knowing how many people were like, and you can see on Goodreads, by the way, reviews are like, well, there's no spaceship in this at all. This was stupid. I thought there was a spaceship in it. And so already the publisher had kind of screwed them. But those were the people who read past the prologue or the first chapter. And then were kind of like, I bought space opera. I got something really way more interesting. This is not set in the future at all. It's very internal. It's super character focused. And that's one of the reasons, those are among the many reasons that I love it. Fantastically written. If I have to compare it to any other author, I said Philip K. Dick in terms of that sort of, I am who I remember myself to be, sort of way. To me, reading it, it felt more John D. MacDonald than any other science fiction author. There's just really, please read this, right? But again, as authors, you don't do that opening in info dump. You do not have to explain yourself, and you do not have to explain your world, right? And this is the thing. Here's the advice. This is the writing advice portion of it. Are you ready? I'm going to lean in so I can be heard. You build your world to your character's demands, not your characters to your world's demands. Now, of course, your characters come out of that world, right? They should feel an organic part of that world. But first them, then the world that supports them. And the world is something you show your characters moving through and interacting with, not, okay, everybody, shut up and sit down because I'm going to do the 3-hour, what would be the equivalent of a 3-hour lecture on the history and cultures and etc. of this world. And okay, then prologue number 2, the magic system, right? Like, show these things actually happening, because that's where a story lives. Yes? Info dumps bad. A mark against our friend Frank Russell. Get through that on this one. So even, okay, so you could, and it pains me to say this right now, I will not, I mean, to recommend a book and then say, here are the places you could just skip. As an editor, you know, working with authors before anyone else has read it, I've said that, like, hey, here's a whole chapter that could just go delete, right? It happens. It happens. And it's not a shameful thing. It's not, oh, you suck that you did that, right? No, right? It happens. Listen to that advice. Apparently no one gave Frank Russell that advice, or if he did, he didn't listen. I don't know, right? That could have gone. If you do find a copy of this, and I suggest that you do, in whatever form it's taken, there was I think at least a kind of Kindle book or like print on demand edition of it from 2017, but I can't find that anywhere. Whatever, find this book, read it. If you really feel like you just aren't going to make it past what you now know to be an opening info dump, you could start at the beginning of chapter 2 and this book would be fantastic. And that's what made this an even more egregious info dump. I think it's, if you tell me, yeah, but I hid in here these clues, and it's like, ooh, okay, well, let's figure out where to put those clues in a place that's more interesting to read, right? I didn't get any sense of that at all. It was established sort of again that now we're in this government, you know, top secret government research facility, and here's a guy who works there. And he's on sort of this level in a hierarchy. And to me, at that point, I'd be like, I believe you that there's a, you know, top secret, most secret, extremely secret, you know, only these two guys know, kind of level, whatever. Like, I believe you. You don't have to go through exactly how that works, right? So if you just start at chapter 2 here, you've got a character who's immediately in trouble. Something weird is happening. And then there's this revelation, right? And you know, we get that he's in the secret government laboratory. He has this sudden traumatic episode, and then he hears that the body that he buried after murdering a woman years ago has been discovered. They found the remains when a tree fell down. And he's just like, I haven't even thought of this in years. And oh no, right now they found the body. I'm going to be found out. My whole thing working at the government research laboratory is going to be blown up. He's married, you know, and has kids. And he's just kind of like, right. And so the whole book then becomes, he's essentially investigating himself, trying to figure out what the police know and so on about this murder that he committed in this kind of, you know, spur of the moment act of passion or rage or whatever it was. Nothing else about that, because they might be spoilers, right? The book is fantastic. It's just so well written. There's a little bit of the sense of humor, but it's not Space Willy's kind of silly stuff. It's not some of the other short stories that he'd done that were really just kind of, you know, fun little riffs on stuff, like kind of gags, you know. It was tremendously well written, almost like perfectly conceived. It just was like plot twist, but not like, and you know, whatever big explosion or I am your father, Luke, kind of like super contrived kind of thing. No offense to Empire Strikes Back, the best of the Star Wars movies, but little twists that just kind of go, wait, oh, what, right? And so Here we have a book that I think was just doubly cursed, right? Here is a fantastic book that if it was sold as the book that it is, could we call it like, well, it was really, I mean, honestly, it's a thriller more than it is a science fiction novel. Very much like 99.9% a thriller. Sold as a thriller with a thriller cover, with cover copy that said, oh, there's a big mystery and this guy is desperate to, you know, anything would be a spoiler, desperate to figure out what, you know, how this could happen, or what do the police know, how much trouble is he in, that kind of stuff, right? And again, it just, to me, it gave me John D. MacDonald vibes reading it. And then what, like Arthur C. Clarke or E.E. Doc Smith vibes by the cover painting, which, as awesome as it is, respect John Berkeley, just not, it's not there. It's not in the book at all. So he's got that. So you start out with, oh, cool, space opera book, and then a chapter of minutia of this government research laboratory. And how many people got that far and were like, I don't know, like, no, I forget it. It's not, whatever it is, it's not worth it. It is worth it. It is worth it. The Mindwarpers is worth it. So that having been said, a double cursed book that is worth finding and worth reading. I am trying to get caught up on these 100 book challenge videos. I am. This has been episode 30 of the 100 book challenge, 31 coming soon. 32 and 33 on deck. The books have been read at least. This is the next video. This is where you subscribe, which is completely free. Everything about Fantasy Authors Handbook is free except for the Best of Fantasy Authors Handbook. Available wherever fine books are sold, as long as that's Amazon. I'm powerless as anyone else. I am just as powerless as anyone else. I will see you soon. I promise.